I recently discovered that my stepmother and stepsister were scheming to exclude me from my father's will. This revelation led me to leave home and face life's challenges on my own for the past year. Now, my father is aware of the reasons behind my departure, and this has transformed our relationship. I'm a 21-year-old man, and I've been living with my dad, stepmom, and stepsister for about 5 years. My mother passed away when I was 15, and my dad remarried a year later. It was a whirlwind romance, and soon I had a new stepmom named Violet and a stepsister called Ellie, who is 4 years my junior. Initially, our home life was manageable, never perfect, but tolerable. Violet attempted to be the caring mother figure, but her efforts felt contrived and hollow. Ellie was always polite yet somewhat aloof. I attributed this to the natural awkwardness arising from our newly formed family dynamic, hoping things would get better with time. After my mom's death, my dad immersed himself in his business, a habit that persisted even after his remarriage. He's a busy CEO of Tesla, often absent due to work commitments, which meant I spent considerable time with Violet and Ellie. For a while, things seemed normal, especially during family meals when my dad was around. I went to college locally, returning home on weekends and holidays. After graduating, I moved back home while job hunting in my field. That's when the atmosphere began to shift. Violet's demeanor cooled significantly, and she started hinting that I should be living independently. Ellie, fresh from university herself, moved back in, making our house feel suddenly overcrowded and filled with silent tensions. While job searching in a tough economy, I sensed an unspoken strain but couldn't pinpoint its source. My dad encouraged me patiently, advising me to find the right job without rushing, while Violet openly expressed that I should leave home. The turning point came unexpectedly. Last week, while I was in my room, I overheard a disturbing conversation between Violet and Ellie in the hallway. Thinking I was out, they spoke openly about removing me from the equation before my dad's will was settled. The cold calculation in their voices as they discussed strategies to undermine me, like restricting my access to our family car and sabotaging my laptop to hinder my job applications, was chilling. They plotted not just to disinherit me, but also talked eagerly about the financial gains and lavish expenditures at my expense. After overhearing their callous plans, I was devastated. These were individuals I had lived with for years, considered my family, yet here they were, conspiring against me as if I were merely an obstacle to their desires. The days that followed were incredibly tough. I struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy around Violet and Ellie, whose every glance now seemed laden with secretive, scheming intent. The experience has profoundly shaken my trust and altered my view of what I once thought of as my family. After discovering my stepmother Violet and stepsister Ellie plotting to exclude me from my dad's will, I grappled with whether to tell him. He seemed genuinely content with Violet, and I didn't want to disrupt his happiness with what might seem like baseless accusations. It would be their word against mine, and I wasn't certain he would believe me over them. Instead of confronting the situation directly, I chose to subtly plan my exit. I reached out to friends to see if anyone needed a roommate and intensified my job search, even applying for roles I had previously dismissed as unsuitable. Anything to get out of the house. About a week later, I got a break. A friend of a friend was looking for someone to sublet their apartment while they studied abroad. The rent was a bit high, but it was manageable if I dipped into my savings. I seized the opportunity. When I informed my dad of my decision to move out, his reaction was one of surprise but supportive. Violet and Ellie, however, barely concealed their delight. They made a show of helping me pack, exchanging sly glances when they thought I wasn't looking. On the day I moved, I accidentally overheard them again. This time, they were discussing how to ensure my dad didn't change his will now that I was out of the picture. It became clear that their plans were not just about driving me out. They intended to disinherit me entirely. In my new, modest apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, I've been piecing together a living with graphic designer and continued job hunting. It's not perfect, but it's far better than living in a toxic environment. My dad checks in every few days, and I can sense his concern over my reduced visits. I've kept busy with excuses about job hunting and settling into my new place, not yet ready to reveal the real reasons for my departure. I've considered legal action to protect my inheritance, but the financial aspect hurts less than the betrayal. At night, I sometimes question if my mother would be disappointed in me for not standing up more firmly. But she always taught me that family is defined by love, not blood or legal ties by that standard. Violet and V were never truly family. Lately, I've been reconnecting with my mother's relatives, seeking the familial warmth I've missed. As for Violet and Ellie, part of me wants to confront them, but another part prefers to simply move forward and rebuild my life independently of them. I've landed in computer technician, which isn't glamorous, but is a step towards self-sufficiency. I've also started therapy on a budget, working through the feelings of anger and betrayal. Through therapy, I've been writing letters to Violet and Ellie, not to send, but to express everything I wish I could tell them. These writings help me cope with my emotions. And in my dreams, I see my mom smiling, telling me she's proud. These moments bring both comfort and a profound sense of loss. As I navigate this challenging chapter, I find solace in establishing a stable routine, focused on building a future that relies solely on my own resilience and strength, nothing more than a hurdle in their path to wealth. I'm building a life for myself now, one that isn't tethered to Violet, Ellie, or any inheritance drama. My dad's birthday is next month, and I'm torn about attending the family dinner. Part of me wants to be there for him, to celebrate together. But the thought of facing Violet and Ellie and acting like all is well makes me feel sick. I found solace in volunteering at a local youth center on weekends. The kids there, many from broken homes or dealing with the loss of parents, resonate with me in a way I couldn't have understood before. This work has been healing, helping me process my own grief and anger. I often wonder how Violet and Ellie explain my sudden departure. Do they portray me as the ungrateful stepson who abandoned his family? Or do they act as if I never existed at all? These thoughts occasionally haunt me, but I try not to dwell on them. I've made new friends through my job and volunteering connections based on who I am rather than any potential inheritance. These relationships feel more genuine than anything I had with Violet or Ellie. Recently, I bumped into Ellie at the grocery store. She was overly friendly, inquiring about my job and my new apartment. I kept my responses vague and left quickly, shaken by the encounter. Lately, I've been contemplating my long-term future. Do I stay in this city, risking awkward run-ins with Violet or Ellie? Or do I start fresh somewhere else? The idea of moving is appealing yet daunting. I'm not ready to leave my dad behind. As my apartment lease nears its end, I'm weighing whether to renew it or find a better place. The idea of moving again is exhausting, but so is the thought of staying put indefinitely. I've also started dating, though nothing serious. It's nice, but it's hard to open up and trust someone new. My therapist says it's normal to feel this way and that rebuilding trust will take time. Work has been a positive distraction. I recently received a small promotion, which has eased some financial pressures. I no longer need to dip into my savings just to make rent, a small but significant victory. I still haven't told my dad about overhearing Violet and Ellie. Every time I consider it, I talk myself out of it, fearing he might not believe me or that it could drive a wedge between us. Sometimes I feel irrational anger towards my mom for leaving me in this situation. If she were still here, none of this would be happening. I'd still have a home, a family, a sense of belonging. I push these thoughts away, but they linger. Cooking has become a new hobby for me. It was never a necessity at home, but now it's essential. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm improving. There's something deeply satisfying about creating meals from scratch, about nourishing myself in this very tangible way. With the holidays approaching, I face new challenges. The thought of enduring fake smiles and forced cheer at the family dinner is daunting, yet spending the holidays alone is hardly appealing. My sleep has been fitful, disturbed by memories of that overheard conversation. I analyze every past interaction with Violet and Ellie, searching for missed signs. It's exhausting, yet I can't seem to stop. I've considered confronting Violet and Ellie, letting them know I heard everything. But what would that achieve? They'd likely deny everything or twist the narrative, potentially complicating things with my dad even further. Some days I manage just fine. I go to work, come home, and carry on with life. Other days, the weight of everything that's happened is overwhelming, making it difficult to even get out of bed. Despite these challenges, I'm committed to forging a path forward, one step at a time, building a life that's defined by my choices, not by the shadows of a family that never really was. I was never the target of her and her mother's scheming. I've started to keep a journal, documenting my thoughts and feelings every day. It's therapeutic to pour everything onto the page. Perhaps one day, these entries will serve as a testament to my journey and how much I've overcome. As I hit the 3-month milestone of living independently, I find myself reflecting on the immense changes in my life. The person who overheard that fateful conversation seems like a stranger now. I've grown stronger, yet in some ways I feel more vulnerable. I'm learning to stand on my own, to build a life that's shaped by my own efforts, not swayed by the whims or wealth of others. I'm unsure of what the future holds. Will I ever confront Violet and Ellie? Will I share the truth with my dad? Can I move past this betrayal and trust others again? These questions linger unanswered as I focus on building a life that's uniquely mine. It's challenging and far from the life I envisioned, but it's authentically mine, and perhaps that's enough. It's been a year since I moved out of my dad's house, spurred by overhearing the sinister plot concocted by my stepmother and stepsister. Much has changed, and not all for the better. I've been remiss in updating this post. Life has been overwhelmingly busy, between work, therapy, and simply trying to stay afloat, leaving little time for news. But I know many of you have been curious about the developments, and I appreciate the support and kindness you've shown, especially during those initial tough months. Your encouragement has been a beacon during this dark period. I'm still at the same job I landed after moving out. The work is fine, but the pay is barely sufficient to cover my expenses. I've been searching for something better, but the job market is unforgiving, and each rejection feels like a personal defeat. My relationship with my dad has become strained. I've avoided family gatherings and made excuses not to visit. He's called more often, sensing something is amiss. It pains me to deceive him, but I'm not ready to disclose the real reasons for my departure. I attended his birthday dinner a few months ago, and it was as uncomfortable as I anticipated. Violet and Ellie put on a show of concern and curiosity about my life, their eyes calculating, likely gauging whether I was struggling enough to relinquish any claim to the inheritance. I left early, using work as an excuse. The holidays were particularly hard. I told my dad I had to work during Christmas, but in reality, I spent the day alone in my apartment, eating a microwave turkey dinner and watching classic films. It was lonely and melancholic, but preferable to the facade of a happy family reunion with Violet and Ellie. Lately, I've been contemplating telling my dad the truth more seriously, but I always stopped short. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it drives a wedge between us, or worse, what if he believes me but chooses to stay with Violet regardless? I'm not sure I could endure that rejection. Therapy has been beneficial, though progress is slow. I'm still grappling with feelings of anger and betrayal. My therapist assures me that healing takes time, but some days it feels like I'll never fully recover. I've encountered Ellie a few times around town since. Each meeting, she acts as if nothing ever happened, as if we're just two acquaintances with a normal past. It's surreal and disconcerting. Each interaction is a reminder of the facade she and her mother maintain and the reality I live with. As I navigate through these daily challenges, I am learning to focus more on myself, crafting a life grounded in self-reliance and resilience, even if the road is long and fraught with obstacles. Part of a family again, one that genuinely cared about me, not tied to ulterior motives or financial gains. The trip was refreshing and somewhat of a lifeline, reminding me of who I am beyond all the turmoil. The volunteer work at the youth center continues to be a highlight in my life. I've bonded with a teenager named Alex who recently lost his mom. Guiding him through his grief has unexpectedly helped me with my own. It's a reminder that amidst life's chaos, there are still meaningful connections to be forged and good to be found in the world. Dating has been challenging. I've tried to put myself out there a few times over the past year, but it's been difficult to truly open up. My last date ended when she pointed out that I seemed to carry too much baggage. She was probably right. With my lease ending next month, I'm at a crossroads. The thought of moving is daunting, yet I'm growing increasingly weary of my small, noisy apartment. I've begun looking at other places, considering even a move to a neighboring city for a fresh start. Reconnecting with my mom's sister, Aunt Ella, after so long was initially awkward, but quickly felt right. We hadn't spoken since my mom's funeral, and rekindling that relationship felt like rediscovering a part of myself I had lost. She invited me to spend a weekend with her family, and despite the daunting prospect of explaining my current life situation, I'm seriously considering it. Work has been stressful with looming layoffs. As one of the newer employees, I'm anxious about being let go. The fear of losing my job is overwhelming, considering my dwindling savings. Nightmares about ending up homeless or being forced to return to my dad's house to face Violet and Ellie haunt me. I wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and it takes hours to calm down enough to fall asleep again. My recent birthday was low-key. Dad called, and a few friends took me out for drinks, but it was hard not to reminisce about past celebrations when my mom was alive. The stark contrast made the day feel even more somber. I often find myself talking to my mom's photo and expressing my frustrations. It might seem childish, but it's a comforting ritual that helps me process my feelings. My resentment towards Violet and Ellie remains strong, occasionally consuming my thoughts with fantasies of confronting them and exposing their deceit in front of my dad. In these daydreams, they confess, and Dad sends them away. But I know these are just fantasies. I've consulted with a lawyer about my options regarding the inheritance, but without concrete evidence, my options are limited. He suggested discussing a trust with my dad, but I'm not ready to open up about everything yet. My health has suffered under the strain of ongoing stress. I've lost weight, and my doctor has noted elevated blood pressure. He's advised finding ways to relax, easier said than done. I've toyed with the idea of moving to a new city to start fresh, where I won't have to worry about running into Violet or Ellie. But the thought of leaving my dad and potentially never seeing him again is too painful to seriously consider. Yet, amidst the darkness, there have been moments of light. I've made some good friends at work and through volunteering, people who appreciate me for who I am, not for any potential inheritance. I've also picked up new hobbies like learning to play the guitar and running. While I'm not particularly skilled at the guitar yet, the process of learning has been immensely satisfying. Running has become more than just a physical activity, it's a mental release, a way to momentarily escape my troubles. As the one-year mark of my move approaches, I find myself wrestling with anxiety over my perceived lack of progress. My therapist reminds me that healing isn't linear and encourages me to be kinder to myself. I'm working on embracing that mindset. Visiting Aunt Ella and her family turned out to be a profound experience. Being around people who knew and loved my mom, who shared stories I'd never heard, made me feel connected to her in a new way. For a weekend, I experienced the warmth and belonging of a real family, a stark contrast to the fraught dynamics I've endured. This connection has given me a glimpse of peace and a reminder that there is a place where I am valued and loved, just as I am. Feeling like I belonged somewhere again was truly rejuvenating, but returning to my empty apartment afterwards was more challenging than I anticipated. The visit with Aunt Ella brought up complex emotions. When she inquired about my dad and his new wife, I struggled to speak, the words caught in my throat. She noticed my discomfort and gently pressed for more details. I found myself opening up and telling her everything about overhearing Violet and Ellie, my fears regarding the inheritance, and why I had been distancing myself from family events. Aunt Ella was livid on my behalf. She was ready to confront Violet and Ellie right away and call my dad to expose everything. I had to calm her down and explain why I hadn't shared these details with him yet. Although she disagreed with my decision to keep silent, she respected it. Before I left, she made me promise to stay in contact and reach out if I needed anything. Knowing that someone from my mom's side of the family was supporting me provided immense comfort. Ella now calls regularly to check in on me and even offered her home as a refuge if my financial situation worsened. I haven't taken her up on that offer yet, but it's reassuring to know it's there. Things with my dad reached a tipping point last week when he showed up at my apartment unexpectedly. The worry on his face was evident. He said he couldn't bear the distance between us any longer and pressed me to open up. I tried to evade his questions at first, but he persisted, and eventually I told him everything. It was an emotional outpouring about the overheard conversation, my inheritance concerns, and my avoidance of family gatherings. Dad listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly grave. After I finished, he sat quietly for what felt like an eternity before apologizing. He admitted he had been oblivious to the dynamics at home, and although he didn't explicitly say he believed me, he didn't dismiss my concerns either. He promised to be more observant of Violet and Ellie's behavior, and to discuss safeguarding my inheritance with his lawyer, regardless of the status of his marriage. I felt a mix of relief and guilt after our conversation. Relief that I had shared my burden, but guilt for possibly upsetting his life and marriage. Dad reassured me that coming forward was the right thing to do, even though I could see the turmoil in his eyes. It's been a week since that conversation, And communication from Dad has been sparse. He's texted to say he's looking into everything and will good news me soon. The wait and the silence are tough. Violet called yesterday, her tone unnervingly sweet, inviting me to a family dinner. I declined, citing work commitments. I can't help but wonder if she knows about my talk with Dad and is attempting some form of damage control. The thought leaves a sour taste in my mouth. As I stand on the brink of my second year of independence, I'm faced with a crossroads. Should I stay here, close to Dad, yet also near Violet and Ellie? Or should I accept Aunt Ella's offer and move closer to my mom's family? Perhaps I should strike out completely on my own, relocating to a new city for a fresh start. I haven't decided yet, but for the first time in a long while, I feel like I have options. The future is uncertain, but it doesn't seem as bleak as it did a year ago. I'm not fully okay, but I'm getting there, focusing day by day on my job, my volunteering, and my new hobbies. I'm determined to build a life that's wholly mine, independent of anyone else's goodwill or inheritance. It's challenging and not the life I envisioned, but it's mine, and that might just be enough. The conversation with Dad has revived many old feelings, and I find myself thinking about my mom more than ever, wondering if she would be proud of me or disappointed that I hadn't fought harder. The uncertainty gnaws at me. The waiting for Dad's life is excruciating, and I find myself jumping at every phone notification, anxious for any news. In quieter moments, the worries return, but I keep busy with work and hobbies to distract myself. Recently, Ellie tried to friend me on social media. I ignored the request, unsettled by her motives. Is she trying to keep tabs on me, or is it another ploy to maintain the illusion of a happy family? Either way, I want no part of it. As I ponder my future, I remain vigilant, cautious, and increasingly hopeful as I navigate this complex journey. Before, I had only vague ideas about possibly going to grad school or advancing in my career. Now, it feels like I'm stuck in survival mode, just trying to keep my head above water. I wonder if there will ever come a time when I can think about the future without being clouded by anxiety. The lease on my apartment is up next week, and after a lot of contemplation, I've decided to move to a slightly better place in a different part of town. It's not a big change, but it feels significant a step toward moving forward rather than remaining stagnant. I had dinner last night with Alex, a young man from the youth center where I volunteer. He's off to college soon and wanted to express his gratitude for the support I've provided over the past year. Seeing his progress in overcoming grief and moving forward has sparked a bit of hope in me. Perhaps I can find a similar path forward. As I pack up my apartment, I reflect on where I was a year ago, leaving my family home with just a suitcase and a broken heart. Now I have a job, an apartment, and friends. It's not a lot, but it's something I built on my own. There's a sense of pride in that, despite the lingering pain and uncertainty. I'm still waiting to hear back from my dad about the investigation. The silence is tough to bear, but I'm trying to stay patient. No matter what happens, I know I can handle it. I've already survived betrayal, loneliness, and uncertainty. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. For now, I'm focusing on my move, setting up my new apartment, and making it feel like home. I'm continuing to build a life that's entirely my own, independent of the drama with Dad, Violet, and Ellie. It's not the life I envisioned, but it's the one I'm living, and for today, that's enough. About 3 months, and quite a bit has happened. After our conversation where I told him everything, Dad spent weeks gathering evidence. He hired a private investigator, checked financial records, and even orchestrated a sting operation. He discovered enough evidence to confirm everything I'd told him and more. It turns out Violet and Ellie had been siphoning money from his accounts for years. They made small withdrawals here and there, which went unnoticed but eventually added up to a significant amount. They had also been trying to manipulate him into changing his will. When Dad confronted them with the evidence, chaos ensued. Violet initially denied everything, but then tried to shift the blame onto Ellie. Ellie, overwhelmed with guilt, confessed to everything and implicated Violet. Ultimately, Dad filed for divorce and is pressing charges against them for financial fraud. Violet and Ellie have since moved out and are staying with Violet's sister in another state. I have mixed feelings about all of this. On one hand, I feel vindicated everything I feared and overheard was true. On the other hand, it's painful to see Dad go through this turmoil. He thought he loved Violet, and realizing it was all a lie has been devastating for him. We've been talking more, and he has apologized repeatedly for not noticing the signs earlier. I've forgiven him, but our relationship is still a bit strained. We're working on it though, starting with weekly dinners together. It's awkward sometimes, but it's a start. I'm settling into my new apartment, which feels like a fresh beginning, truly mine, with no ties to Violet or Ellie. I've been furnishing it slowly, turning it into a comfortable home. Work has been going better as well. The layoffs I feared didn't happen, and I even received a small raise. It's not a lot, but it's enough that I'm no longer living paycheck to paycheck. I've started saving a bit each month, which feels like a small victory. Therapy continues, and my therapist notes that I'm making progress, even if it doesn't always feel that way. The feelings of anger and betrayal are still there, but they no longer consume my every thought. I'm learning to live with what happened, not letting it define me, and focusing on the positives in my life. Each day, I take another step forward, building a life that's authentically mine. Lately, I've been reconnecting with my mother's side of the family, and it's been a blessing to have Ella by my side. She's like a second mother to me, always ready to offer advice or just listen when I need it. I've also been spending more time with her family, getting to know my cousins again. It's comforting to feel part of a family, even though it's different from the one I grew up with. Dating has been a bit of a mixed bag. I've been out on a few dates, but haven't found anything serious yet. Trusting new people is still a challenge, something my therapist says is perfectly normal and will take time to overcome. I'm learning to be patient with myself. My dad and I recently discussed his decision to set up a trust fund for me, separate from his personal assets. He wants to ensure I'm taken care of, regardless of what the future holds. While I insisted it wasn't necessary, he was adamant it's his way of making amends. Dad also mentioned selling our family home due to the many painful memories associated with it. While part of me is sad to see it go, it is my childhood home. After all, I understand his need for a fresh start. Recently, I had an awkward encounter with one of Ellie's friends who blamed me for some past troubles. I chose to walk away rather than engage, realizing that their opinions no longer matter to me. I know the truth, and that's enough. Work has been a great distraction. I've been dedicating myself to my job, taking on extra projects. My efforts haven't gone unnoticed. My boss has even hinted at a potential promotion. It's rewarding to feel appreciated and to see my hard work paying off. Dad and I are planning a simple trip together, just a weekend at a nearby lake where we used to camp when I was a child. It feels like a positive step towards mending our relationship and creating new, happier memories. Aunt Ella recently gave me a box of my mom's old belongings, photos, letters, and some of her jewelry. Going through these items was emotional but also healing. It's a tangible connection to her, which I treasure. I've also been reaching out to old friends, reconnecting with those who were there before things went south with Violet and Ellie. While not everyone has been receptive, it's been fulfilling to rebuild my support network. The legal issues with Violet and Ellie are still ongoing, but I try not to let them dominate my thoughts. They will face the consequences of their actions, but I'm focused on moving forward, not letting their fate control my life. Looking ahead, I'm even considering going back to school for a master's degree. For the first time in a long while, I feel capable and ready to take on such a commitment. There are still tough days, but the good ones are becoming more frequent. I'm not fully okay yet, but I'm on my way. I'm building a new life, one that isn't defined by past hardships. It's not the life I envision, but it's uniquely mine, and I'm eager to see what the future holds.